You're listening to the MindPod Network. This episode of the It's All Happening podcast is brought to you by Bel Sante Beauty, the best in organic, non-synthetic, non-GMO, locally sourced beauty products. Visit etsy.com/shop/Bel Sante Beauty. It's all happening. 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 It's all Welcome to the podcast, episode 111 of the It's All Happening podcast. I'm Zach Leary. I'm your host. Here we all are, first episode of 2018, and we are numerically starting off with episode 111, 111. So welcome to 2018. Wow, pretty crazy, right? This week on the podcast, we have a fantastic guest, someone who we'll definitely have back on because it was very dense. There's so many great things to talk to her about. Her name is Amanda Yates Garcia, otherwise known as the Oracle of Los Angeles. And she's a witch. Yep, she practices witchcraft in a very beautiful, positive, transformative way. And we will talk more about her in a second. Let's talk about the new year for just a moment. New year, new everything. One of my favorite quotes from my father, good old TL, goes like this: "You can be anything this time around." It's actually more of a concept, a way of living. A little bit off topic, but the roots of it stem from an album he made in the late 60s, maybe 1970. An album of the same name that has him getting down with Stephen Stills, John Sebastian, and Jimi Hendrix playing bass. Really very cool. Anyway, every year most of us consider or put into practice some form of a New Year's resolution or some kind of manifestation goal that are reflections of last year's triumphs, pitfalls, or break-evens. As I get older, I feel less and less sure about making resolutions in the traditional sense, because they set the stage for being hard on oneself should you fall short. Life is too precious to beat yourself up. We're all doing the best we can. Instead, I prefer working with the idea of reinvention, redefining the very nature of your life by taking a look at what's working and discarding what isn't. That way life can be viewed as a vast metaphysical instrument with a dashboard made of buttons that constantly fine-tune the atmosphere inside and out that make up the play that is your life. Bringing in practices, people, or energy that increase the amount of love, joy, fulfillment, and inspiration in your life is an ongoing process. At the same time, it's never too late to shake things up and reinvent the whole thing. You can be anything this time around, again and again. Don't let anyone tell you it's too late to do what it is you feel is best for your time here on Earth, whatever it is that may be. I'm not suggesting it applies to everyone, but there are times when thinking you are not living up to your potential is really just a projection of external forces that are defining your potential in the first place. That's a trap. For instance, your parents' idea of what you should be, the impossible beauty standards set forth by media, your neighbor's new car that is nicer than yours, or the shame you bring onto yourself when you eat something really gross. In today's rapid-firing world of data and imagery, it never ends. It seems we are constantly being presented with what's wrong instead of what's right. I'm finding the best practice for going into the new year is reinvention combined with contentment. You have everything you need. Now just mix it up and upgrade your human biocomputer. I love you. We're all doing great. Happy New Year. Words for the Year by Albert Camus. My dear, in the midst of hate, I found there was within me an invincible love. In the midst of tears, I found there was within me an invincible smile. In the midst of chaos, I found there was within me an invincible calm. I realized that through it all, that in the midst of winter, I found there was within me an invincible summer. And that makes me happy, for it says that no matter how hard the world pushes against me, within me, there's something stronger, something better, pushing right back. All right, some thoughts on New Year's that I wanted to share. And that great poem by Albert Camus. Very cool. So this week on the podcast, Amanda Yates Garcia, otherwise known as the Oracle of Los Angeles, and we did this in person at the kitchen table. She's a witch. Throughout her years as a magical practitioner, she's given countless tarot readings, spent months at Zen monasteries, given lectures on witchcraft at various universities. She draws from a broad range of esoteric strategies, including the Western mystery traditions of tarot, alchemy, and hermeticism, shamanic healing practices, positive magic, and witchcraft, herbalism, and energy work. Yeah, she does a lot. It's pretty intense. She's a really fantastic being. I really enjoy the podcast so much. It was great to be in her presence and spend time with her. So if you've ever been curious about witchcraft and how it manifests and really practical applications of it that you can use in your life in all sorts of various methods and applications and contexts, I learned so much. Check out her website, oracleoflosangeles.com. And this is Amanda Yates Garcia. Amanda Yates Garcia, the Oracle of Los Angeles. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you for doing this in person, too, and for tolerating my insistence on it.
No, I'm happy to do it in person. It's just the distances that one has to cross to get to be in proximity with one another. But I'm very glad to be here.
Well, and I mean, in a way, that's kind of a great metaphor for everything, right? The distance one needs to cross to be in proximity to anything amazing, right?
Yeah.
Such as life.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So happy solstice.
Thank you.
So that is where I was going to kind of take off from. The solstice, I think and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in your tradition and field of expertise, the winter solstice is very, very important, very special. Tell me why.
Oh, that's such a great question. Well, we can think of the solstice, both the winter and the summer solstice as access points of time through which things turn, right? They're the markings of the sort of ultimate points in the cycles of ebb and flow and contraction and release, we might say, if we're thinking in a sort of Martha Graham sort of sense.
Sure.
And so, any holiday in probably most or many traditions is about marking time. Holidays are about slowing things down and recognizing what is sacred to us. And in a sense, they're arbitrary, right? We invent places to put them, and we say that when we impose meanings on top of them. One of the things I like about the solstice, though, or in particular about holidays often in the practice of witchcraft, is that they are based on phenomena, on things that we can touch or see or feel, or phenomena that we can recognize in the world around us, rather than just sort of the birthday of a special person, for instance, that, we can't necessarily see or know for sure whether or not that exists, but we do know that the solstice exists, right? We know.
Right. You can feel it.
Yeah, you can feel it. We can measure it in terms of, how long the days are, the nights are. And so, the winter solstice is when we recognize that it's where we really honor the idea of entering into the dark, of recognizing the fertility of the darkness, and also recognizing and honoring maybe the losses that come with experiencing that return to the earth. It's really about basing our experience and honoring this sacredness of life and death, and these really fundamental and important qualities and aspects of our lives that without the holidays, without making a point of marking them, we can just breeze through and not notice. Right. So solstice represents the return to the light as well, the return to sunlight, the return to summer, the times where things come to us, where things flow and are easy. So
what's the the fertility of the darkness, as you put it. My relationship with the thing about time and this, this calendar that we sort of have fallen upon, from months to years, and especially as the, Western world progresses and becomes more dug into our Earth, the compartmentalization of years, and then it's become kind of trite about this New Year's thing. It's, oh God, we're going to make these resolutions and looking back on the year and so forth. And it's a very linear sort of way of looking at the world. It's as if, Mother Universe has, thought about it in terms of years, but seasons. And like you said, it's tangible. You can feel it and you can sense it, and in certain places around the world, it's like one day, all of a sudden, something is different, right? But what is it like about the fertility of the darkness, and where does that come from? What are the origins of that way of looking at it?
Well, you mean what are the origins of solstice?
Yeah, just like the holiday. Yeah. The historical kind of context behind it.
Well, most of the traditions, most pagan traditions, are based on like the wheel of the year and the changing of the seasons, specifically in relation to like the production of food. So
right.
Yeah. So
very pragmatic.
Yeah. So, it's really about, when we're thinking about seasons, it's usually in relation to the harvest, or in relation to like what nourishes us, what sustains us in the wintertime. The seeds are planted. That's what we're talking about, the fertile darkness. Seeds go into the dark, but also the leaves on the trees go into the dark and they fall to the ground, or, bears or other animals go into hibernation, things go to sleep. If you're talking about the northern, traditions, of course, like I'm really interested in spiritualities of places, of the specificity of places. And so part of my work and practice is, as an artist, or specifically as the Oracle of Los Angeles, is about trying to understand what that means for us here, specifically, for instance, in this city.
Oh, I love it. Tell me. Because I'm an Angelino, and I love Los Angeles history, and I do generally like LA in spite of all of its. Oh,
I love LA.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
Oh, yeah. I'm committed to this place.
Awesome. So tell me about this. I'd love that about you.
Well, so So I don't know that I've completely like resolved like, oh, this is what solstice means in LA. You know, this is something that I'm interested in exploring, and which I think is a practice that we should all be doing in our very own, like wherever we find our bodies, wherever we find our sort of habitat. And I mean that specifically in the sense of our habits, you know, where we, like the places we inhabit, that we frequent, that we come to and return to day after day, that we move in and out of the cycles with. So here, and I can really only speak to where I am personally, but I think it's really important that everybody sort of look to where they are personally. It's that sort of local spirituality, which I think just for me, I find really compelling, and which I think also is really important in terms of navigating some of the more tricky terrain that we find ourselves in, just, you know, as a culture at large, in terms of like cultural appropriation, for instance. So, you know, or forcing one culture to sort of acclimate or assimilate to other cultures. So for instance, like here in the United States, you know, we have the Christmas holiday, which is kind of a national holiday and something that is sort of in theory experienced the same way all across the country. And yet there's a lot of people who practice different traditions. And also, you know, the idea, for instance, of reindeer sort of landing on your roof, which I think is great. You know, I love Santa Claus and all of that, but I also do think it's interesting and worthwhile to think about, you know, why are we doing that here in LA when there are no reindeer? Could it be a different kind of deer? Right. Or, you know, like how is it relevant to our lives and purposes here in Los Angeles? So in terms of like, what does solstice mean here? I mean, it certainly we notice, I very strongly notice the length of the days, right? The days leading up to solstice get darker and darker. And it's not something that I particularly enjoy, like short days. It takes me a long time to get up in the morning. And so I like having extra time. Like I like having more daylight so I can get more things done. But so there's the sort of physical like experience of time in terms of day and night that I really notice in terms of the solstice. But, you know, in terms of my client base, I'm a healer, I'm a witch. That's how I make my living. I'm also a writer and artist. And I see all those practices as intertwined. Essentially, I'm a priestess, right? So really that's just about working in service to the goddess as I understand her, in whatever way or shape or form that is required. But so, you know, based on, you know, the needs of my clients and my community, I think we've all been thinking a lot about our losses this year, or in 2017. You know, the cultural climate is one of great disturbance. You know, with the current administration. And I think, you know, most of my clients are really worried about, you know, rights being taken away from themselves or from people they love. They're worried about the destruction of the environment or police brutality or like immigration issues, you know.
All very real things.
All very real things. So there's all these really sort of macro issues like the environment, the government, politics that people are addressing when they do solstice work. But then there's also really personal issues, you know. So, you know, as the days get shorter, as we spend more time in the dark, we have time then to sort of reflect on what we've experienced throughout the year. And, you know, a lot of people have experienced losses of relationships or pets or people that they love. You know, maybe they've lost their house or their job. So, you know, it gives us a time to honor and sort of reflect that loss is inherent to life, that life and death are inextractable from one another. They essentially are the same thing.
It's the same cycle of
the same cycle, principles. And so I feel like that's one of the reasons why we have spiritual practice, is to make sense of those things, and also to be in community with each other as we make sense of those things, to give each other support. So that's like it's something that's really important about that. My mother, I'm a hereditary witch, and I learned many of the ceremonies that I hold from my mother. And one of the things that she talks about is how in the day, so the solar energy in the daylight is about, for lack of a better word, ego, right? It's about the things that are around us, about the things that we can see. It's about doing, it's about activity. And often community, play, picnics, all these things. If you think of the sun card in the tarot deck, it's all that sort of joyful celebration of what is here and immediate. Whereas at night, the sun disappears. The sun, this thing that gives us life and nourishment, that sort of that it energetically sustains everything. Right? The sun disappears, and only when the sun disappears can we see out into the universe. Are we able to recognize the infinite?
See the stars. And
exactly.
Right.
It's because of that darkness, because that sort of solar shroud is removed, that veil is removed, that we can see out into the infinite and recognize that we are small, we are humble, and that we are part of something far larger.
It's interesting. So in a way, like the sun kind of hides some stuff.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right.
And so I just recently did a Solstice workshop about this, about what, so the question was, what losses did you experience this year, and what did they allow you to see that you couldn't see before? Because often the things that when we lose something, it also opens up a lot that we, maybe didn't notice that we had or was available to us.
That's for sure.
Yeah. Have you experienced that?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. With a lot of loss, I think no matter what it is, if it's a person, if it's, a job. This year in my life, it was a relationship. And definitely the worst, I don't want to say the worst, but that's a strange word to use, but I should say the saddest breakup I've ever been through. And like the sense of loss just exposed what it is that I was not addressing in my own life. The relationship was almost masking it in a way, because I thought I could just sort of, perpetuate that within the relationship. But then it went away, and I was like, oh, well, my part in it going away was because I hadn't been dealing with this.
So by losing that relationship, you were forced to see all these things that you hadn't been addressing before?
Definitely. I just specifically a couple that are pretty, pronounced, I think, in my life, and what's good specifically, like mistaking loneliness for like romanticism. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of like if you get into that space of loneliness, and then it can sort of, if you're not careful with that dance, it can sort of play tricks in your mind or play tricks in your psyche, and then you sort of jump into a reality that is just filling the loneliness, but is not right for you anyway. Sure, it's filling loneliness, and that's fine, but then everything else is suffering.
Well, so when you say loneliness and you're equivocating it with romanticism, do you mean that the loneliness takes on a kind of romance, or there's something sort of compelling about that loneliness that you sort of indulge in? Or
Well, that's actually pretty interesting. But I meant sort of like how the loneliness can be fixed by romanticism.
Oh, right.
Yeah. But that was interesting as well. Yeah, and romanticism / family,
That there's, so what you're, if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that there's a sense that there's a sort of existential loneliness that you feel, or that one might feel,
surrounded by tons of people all of the time.
Right. And that there's a hope that through love, through romance, or through connection with others, that we can appease that loneliness. But then it sounds like you're saying that desire for connection could also just be like a way of masking the truth of that loneliness, which I don't mean to put words into your mouth, but if I'm understanding you correctly, that you're positing the idea that maybe the loneliness is a more profound sort of spiritual state of awareness of one's intrinsic aloneness in this world.
Well, I mean, like one of the basic, tenets of, spiritual mysticism, no matter what method or tradition you practice, it's that you are perfectly whole and complete exactly as you are, right? You're in the goddess's image, and here you are, and you're beautiful, and there's nothing that needs to be changed or fixed. There's no lack, worry, doubt, everything is right here, right? And many, many traditions share that in common. So not honoring that, I think is a very, I don't know, it's a very, I think, modern, linear, Western way of behaving in the world, lack, more and more coming from a place of lack, just striving, just more and more. It's got to be something to fill me up. It's got to be something. It's not necessarily, the girl or the word, but it could be anything, and just getting out of that place of honoring, well, this is where I am in the process, and it's fine. There's no set idea about how, things were supposed to be at this point in my life. And if they're not that way, it's fine.
Right. Well, I feel like that's one of the things that's most important about solstice, and about the, especially working ceremonially with solstice. There's a chant that is done in the reclaiming tradition that goes, "What is lost to the night?" And then you say, whatever it is. So for instance, relationship is lost to the night. Relationship is lost to the night. To fall and rise again, to die and be reborn. What must you lose to the night? And so I feel like what's beautiful about that chant is the idea that, relationship is lost to the night. Love is lost to the night. Justice is lost to the night. It dies, it falls, we lose it, and then it comes back again. And that there's nothing in life that we will not lose, but also there's nothing that is lost forever, because it's all in this huge cycle. And I think that really does speak to the idea of loneliness. I went through a huge and horrible breakup. I've been through many, but one of I've loved this very comforting haiku, which I believe is by the Japanese poet Issa, and it is, "I am alone tonight with the tadpoles, with the universe." And I used to say that to myself over and over again during these breakups, because, I would feel...
Wait, say it one more time, sorry.
"I am alone tonight with the tadpoles, with the universe." And so to me, I took that to mean, in dealing with one's losses, and this feeling of that, no matter who you're with, they can and will be taken from you, that nothing is permanent, that no one can be inside you and know your heart, but that you're alone, but you're with everything. Like you are part of the universe. Like you are alone with the tadpoles. You are alone with the dogs. You are alone with your partner. You are alone with the entirety of the universe around you. In other words, you're not alone. You're never alone. You're always completely in the heart of spirit, of the divine, and that we're as incarnated fragments of spirit. We're experiencing aloneness, or we're experiencing loss, or we're experiencing gain, or we're experiencing love. And we are the part of the goddess that feels those things, that recognizes those things, and that they move through us, and then they move on again. They fall and rise again. They die and are reborn.
Why do you think it's so pronounced in our culture to look outside of ourselves for satisfaction or for fulfillment, or whatever you want to call it, contentness, satisfaction, happiness, whatever?
That's such a great question. And I feel like there are so many answers to that. I mean, so, okay, on one hand, we are social beings. So our answers very much do come from the collective, from other people. We look outside ourselves for support and nourishment and love and sustenance, because that is how it comes to us. Like none of us do live alone. Very few of us could even live alone. Like if we had to go out into the woods or something and support ourselves, most of us couldn't just go out there naked and find a way to survive, right? We genuinely do need other people.
Right.
And so part of it is natural. Like we should look to others because we need them. On the other hand, obviously, Western culture in particular is very, individualistic and egocentric. And I think that that's a part of the history of, capitalist individualism and Calvinism in particular, going back, for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And I think the real sorrow of that is that it's an illusion, that there's a myth in our culture that we go it alone, that we pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, that we can sort of acquire things from outside and support ourselves through those things. But that's never the case. Like, for instance, you have this myth in our culture of the self-made man.
Right.
And there is no such thing as a self-made man. Like, so let's say we take some big mogul who creates a microchip and becomes very rich because of that. Right. But did he literally create that microchip? Did he mine the metals in the plastic? Did he drive it along the roads that were needed in order to transport those microchips? Did he educate himself at university?
Right.
Did he...
And had a very good team around him.
Yeah, exactly.
In the creation of that.
Yeah, so he didn't do it alone. He didn't just go out into the woods and come back with a microchip like Moses or something. Moses probably didn't even do that either. So that I don't know. I mean, I guess a lot of our cultural archetypes are based on illusions.
Yeah, they are. They're based on illusions and just self-perpetuating ideas that sort of feed the ego, and then right. But part of the reason why I ask is, and why I'm also really fascinated by what it is you do, is to talk a lot about it on this podcast, but the absence of mysticism as a culture. I mean, for thousands of years, humanity, and the real the pillars of humanity. I mean, ancient Egypt and ancient Rome, and I mean, pre-Christianity Rome, ancient pagan Rome. And I mean, mysticism was a huge part of what defined society and what defined belief and perception and relationship to the world. And as we sort of progress into the future at a very rapid rate now, things are moving much faster. There seems to be sort of a reduction of that. There has been in the last couple hundred years. I mean, really since the rise of, the Industrial Revolution has really, quashed that, because the entire model changed from somebody who was had some kind of relationship with the agrarian world, and maybe the arts and oral traditions and sitting around and talking, and it changed to that of a worker. Somebody who was brought up to work 9 to 5 in a factory, and you grew up and you went to school in this cement building from a certain age to a certain age, and everyone is taught the same subject in order to fill a cog in this machinery that's on and on and on and on and on. So, the absence of all of these great, not the absence, but the disappearance of all these great traditions that humanity had for so long is it's very puzzling to me. On the other hand, there is, your community is very strong. The rise of the psychedelic movement, again, is very strong. Things like Burning Man are strong, and cool things are happening. So, what was my question? I did have a question there. Oh yeah, my question was, with your community that you foster and nurture, what's what are people hungry for? Like, what's the intent there? Like, what is it that they gather together for? What? I mean, I'm sure everybody has a different reason. Of course, I get that. But like, what's if there's a general commonality? I don't know.
People, on a really simple level, I think people just want to live beautiful, meaningful lives. And they want to find a way to stay on that raft, right? If we have a raft of beauty and meaning, and in this challenging cultural climate, there's wind and there's sea storm, always trying to knock you off that raft of beauty and meaning and connection with other people. And so I think they hope that their spiritual practice will help them stay on that raft so that we can all sort of hold on to it together. And ultimately, I think we all recognize life is short and it goes fast. And we want to we want to enjoy it.
Yeah.
I think that's really what people want. And beyond that, I think, a lot of the people that I work with can't just enjoy it when they see so many others suffering, or when it feels like their joy might come at the expense of other people. So I think they also want to find a way to create a harmonious and healthy world. And exactly as you said, since the Industrial Revolution, but potentially since, maybe several thousand years before that, and the beginning of, surplus agriculture and slavery and money, which sort of all came about at the same time, that that it becomes increasingly difficult, that the things move so quickly, and there are these large forces at work that knock us off balance, or that we feel like we have to scramble, So yeah, we want to have a spiritual practice, but we also have to pay our rent, and we have to pay our Verizon bill, and we have to pay our student loans, and we have to get money for childcare, and we have to even like find someone to have a child with, or, whatever it is that people, want to do. And so we don't really have the structures in our culture to support a sort of monastic life. And
definitely not in this culture.
Definitely not in this culture. And even in cultures that do, there's kind of a priest class that does that, right? It's not everybody who gets to do that. And unless it's like a very small group of like a small indigenous community, for instance, in, Japan, the monasteries are it's kind of an elite.
Right. Upper.
It's for like the second son of like upper wealthy class, like wealthy people go, or who, I don't know if it's actually a second son, but it is like that someone from a wealthy upper class person can go do that. And
India is still entrenched in the caste system, even if they say they're not, they are.
Right.
Yeah.
So, sure. But like, so, spirituality, if it's something that is seen as separate from our daily practice in life, almost in all cultures is something that's sort of ancillary, because of course our first agenda of the day has got to be working towards making sure that we have, room and board.
Right.
So I think,
which I can't stand that. I hate that.
Right.
I mean, taking birth into this world, like now, I think in a lot of ways you're kind of dealt a bunk hand. It's kind of a bad hand in a way that there are certain constraints and constructs that everybody has to deal with. And the only way that you really can't is if you decide to, become homeless and live on Skid Row, or go crazy and go to an asylum or go to prison or something like that. But everybody has to, you've got to have to deal with the illusion, I mean,
well, it deals with you. It cares about you. Yeah, so you can say, I don't want to, but it will force you to. Even for people who, especially for people who are in prison, who are on Skid Row, or who are in mental institutions, like, then you are forced into proximity of dealing with all the things that you don't maybe want to deal with. So I guess we might say there is no escape, but the good news is, that's what we're here to do. That's what our work is, we're all sort of here, and we can be miserable about it and cry about it, but one of the things that I think especially is important for witches is that we have a sense of that we are agents, right? We are sort of dropped here in this world, not by our own volition, sort of pulled out of the ocean of timeless experience and fragmented into, being individuals at play in this sort of crazy jungle, beautiful battlefield, or whatever it is that we're in. But we are agents, and we then say, okay, so this is what I have. What do I want to do with this? Where can I go? What do I want? The witchcraft is often very much based on desire, and then the realization of that desire. So it's in some ways tantric, I guess you might say. But so, it is very frustrating to sort of be thrown into a world where, whether or not you want to, you have to deal with gentrification and like non-rent control apartments and expensive student loans and, police brutality and racism and misogyny, or, also a host of issues that you might be like, I don't want to deal with this. This is not important to me. I don't want to address this. Nevertheless, there you are. And, what do you want to do with it? How can you find power within that? Recognizing that you are a powerful agent, and that you can change your world but that we also need to band together in order to do that.
So changing your world and banding together to do it. But so starting with the first part, changing your world. So tell me what is witchcraft in relationship to that? Like how you work with your students and helping them to change their world.
Well, so one of the reasons why I think it's really important to identify that witchcraft is based on our desire is because, desire is the thing that makes everything grow. It's that will to live, it's that, I guess, will, maybe in a Schopenhauerian sense, but it's that, the plants grow because they have a desire and a drive to reach the sun, right? And we form relationships out of desire and drive. We create children because of that. We eat because of that. Everything we do is because of that. One of the things that I think I work with a lot with my clients is that a lot of the time people have difficulty even identifying, what their desires are beyond like, I want food or I want love but the more clear we can get about them, the more likely we are to be able to achieve them and realize them. Right. So, identifying what we want is one of the first principles in terms of like being able to make your magic work and your magic effective. So you need to be able to say it. You need to be able to say it kind of in one sentence and with great clarity. So, and then beyond that, it has to be measurable. So it has to be quantifiable. So for instance, if a client came in and said to me, I want to be happy, the difficulty with that is it's not really a measurable goal. And of course, one day you will be happy, like you'll probably be happy later today when when your pizza arrives in front of you and you're like, yes, this is a great moment. So is that it? Mission accomplished? Spell is achieved? Like you have to be able to identify what it is that...
Get into it a little bit more than that.
Into like, what do you mean by happy? Right. So a lot of that is just, about the clarification of process. But then too, a witch is an adventurer. So we know that like, just because you have desires doesn't mean that they're always going to get met, but there's a sort of thrill of entering into the dance, and that sort of loss and gain and the struggle to create a more beautiful world, to allow yourself to become the hollow bone through which the goddess manifests herself in the world is an adventure, and it's fun and it's dangerous and exciting. And so you just have to acknowledge that it's not always like everything won't always go your way, but you can be curious about the results. I think that's also another really important thing, that is the idea of curiosity, is about exchanging curiosity for devastation, right? Like if you don't get what you want, rather than being devastated, being curious. And it comes down to faith, I guess, in yourself and in the universe. And I think it's Albert Einstein who said that was like the most important question, right? Whether or not the universe is friendly is like really the most important philosophical question, because it changes.
What's the answer to that?
I believe that, yes, the universe is a friendly place. I believe that.
But there's a tumultuous side to it.
Yeah.
Yes.
There is. I believe evil exists as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. And in the universe, the force of the planets expanding and, and the cold, dark vacuum of space. And, when it can all be pretty intense out there.
It's intense. That is for sure. It is intense.
And how we got to be here sitting in these flesh suits, having the conversations about how intense it is out there is a fucking miracle in and of itself, right?
It really is.
So, like, dealing with witchcraft and dealing with, I mean, these are very large existential questions, or dealing with, you're working with a student who, and you're, I want to be happy, but you're drilling it in a little bit more and, help, define what happiness is for you. What's the methods? Like, how do spells work and chanting? Like, I'm just, I want to know more about what you do, how it works.
Yeah. So, a spell, essentially any kind of ceremonial ritual work that I might do, again, like, holidays are specific days that we mark in time, whereas spells can be done anytime, right? So, it's really about setting. The first thing that a spell does is to mark whatever it is that you're doing as non-ordinary. So essentially anything that you do could be a spell, but one of the things that makes it a spell is saying, this is now a spell, right? So this time, right now when I'm doing this thing, is different than other times. It's a special time. It has more meaning and significance. And that happens through statement, right? And that's kind of intention. Through intention.
Okay.
Yeah. Through your intention, through saying, now we are doing this. So that is why, most magic involves what's known as casting a circle, right? So that's about creating a container or separation of whatever it is that you're doing right at that moment from all the other things that you might do, is about creating this sort of cauldron of concentration where you can utilize the energies that you've raised in order to achieve whatever result it is that you're trying to achieve. So you're going to, first, in order to do that, you need to, ground and center, right? So to connect yourself with a larger power source, such as the earth, such as the life force. One of the things that I really like to do in my ceremonial workings is to take time as a sort of meditation practice at the beginning to feel your pulse, but to really feel it, to feel that life force flowing through you. And also then to listen, right? You start off by listening, by letting your conscious awareness extend out into space. And then to hear, to feel, to really become aware on a tactile and visceral sense that the life force that is flowing through you is the same life force that's flowing through everything, that's spinning the planet on its axis.
That's all the same stuff.
Yes, right. It's that energy is all the same, and we're feeling it flow through us. And so then, once you reconnect yourself with that awareness, you start to sort of harness the power of that creative engine, and then you create a safe space, and then you call in whatever spirits that you're working with, whatever deities or angels or gods or guides or ancestors or whoever it is that you're working with, to align yourself with a larger force, or essentially like a paradigm. These beings are paradigmatic beings that exist in the realm of consciousness that then find their way into material reality through us, through our deeds, through our words, through our actions. So they need us in order for them to come into being. But we need them in the sense that, they are the sort of activating principles or the paradigms that we're utilizing through our imagination and putting into material reality. So it's a sort of co-creative relationship, which is helping us get beyond our sort of small ego mind, which feels powerless or feels like it's at the mercy of the forces around itself, and aligns us with something larger and immortal, essentially something that has existed before us and will go on existing long after we are gone.
Right.
And so then you create that cauldron, and then within that cauldron, you do all sorts of essentially liturgy, art practices. You might do drumming, you might do drawing, you might do, you're using a sort of lot of props and accoutrements such as incense or candles or pins or carving things in wax or whatever. And that's all of that is a way of harnessing your intention, the thing that is in your mind that exists within the realm of consciousness, right? Because consciousness does not exist in material reality.
Right.
We have to bring it into material reality. And so that's what you're doing when you're casting a spell, is you're bringing consciousness, your desire, into material reality through whatever object you're making or working with, or whatever chant you're doing. You're putting it, you're reverberating it out into the material world. And then, of course, you thank the deities, you give offerings, you close the circle. And then you also work afterwards to start bringing whatever it is that you desire into reality through your deeds and through your efforts.
So you're doing your part.
Yes,
It's
exactly.
not just like, hey,
you don't just kick back then and say, okay, it's all up to you, universe. Yeah.
Right.
So that's what you do. And it's exciting because then you start to see things change and shift, and you start to see, you also can see very often a reflection of your own inner workings. Oftentimes, spells are volatile. So, you will get a mixed bag of results, but usually they're revealing something to you about your own internal conflicts about whatever it is that you say that you want. For instance, love is a big one, right? And so, love spells, for instance, are tricky because often they show, I'm of the mind that magic always works on some level,
but some way or another.
In some way or another, right. It always works, but it's tricky, and it doesn't have the same agenda for you that you might have for yourself.
Oh, well, therein lies
the rub, right? Yeah. Because the thing is about it, and I always say this when dealing with, specifically when doing divination, people come in for divination. What they really want is for you to be like, yeah, everything's going to go great for you without hardly any effort on your part. And you're going to get everything that you want. And yeah, kick back, enjoy. I mean, that's basically what people want to hear. It's certainly what I want to hear. But the reality is, like, spirit doesn't have that same agenda for you, right? Like, it doesn't care whether or not you're happy. If happiness was really the goal for spirit, then everything would be happy. There would be happiness all the time. But spirit really wants the breadth of experience. I'm of the mind that spirit wants full realization. Like, it wants you to be the biggest, most magnificent version of yourself because right. You're spirit, you're spirit incarnate.
Why wouldn't it? Right.
It wants you to be the most magnificent thing that you can be, the most magnificent you can be. And that doesn't happen through, as we know, that does not happen through easiness. Very rarely do we become magnificent through things being easy.
Yes.
We become magnificent through labor a lot of the time, through work, through effort, and also ecstasy, so there's a kind of combination of those two things. And
through, adversity, of course, but, being able to, navigate your way through adversity and coming out the other side.
That's exactly it.
Right.
Exactly. It's not the adversity that makes us great, because many of us have experienced adversity that does not make us great at all. It beats us down and we never recover. But what makes us great is, recovering from that and becoming stronger, learning from it, and growing, and then transforming it through the power of our creativity into something beautiful that contributes to the rest of the world.
So you, I remember it was a couple months or so ago now, I think 6 weeks, I don't know, but the binding spell for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
That you called on. So what, too early to see the results?
I think that we're seeing a lot of results.
It's impossible to tell in a way.
It's impossible to tell. Bad. It is. I think we see a lot of results. The work that everybody is doing, not just witches and magicians, but there are a lot of people working to dismantle the Trump agenda. And for that, I am very grateful. But we also have to take into consideration, dude has powerful magic because he has a lot of...
He made it this far.
So he must be doing some kind of dark arts back there in the Oval Office.
It's fucking crazy. It's so weird.
Yeah. I mean, it is and it isn't, because history is littered with examples of buffoons taking control and like running amok.
And we were talking earlier, you mentioned you do think evil exists, and I agree with that. And evil can exist. Well, I mean, it's like the great old metaphor about Satan. If Satan came back to the material world and, hey, you'd want to have a drink with Satan. He's probably a cool, smart, good-looking guy, right?
Yeah.
Pretty sexy. And you'd be, hey, I'm going to have a drink with him. And you'd follow him around for a long while until you realize, oh, shit.
I'm a part of something that I don't want to be a part of.
Hitler was the perfect.
Sure.
He started off very promising.
Well, I think that, any sort of charismatic leader that we look to, like Stalin, Mao, like Caligula,
right.
Whatever charismatic leader that we follow, David Koresh, and even ones that seem, more benign. I think the real problem here is the way that we love to give our authority over to other people, because it's just so much easier. And especially when you have someone who's like, yeah, give me your power and I will protect you. I mean, and that I think is the essence of evil, sort of in a nutshell, is this idea that we're willing to sacrifice our own agency, because it is easier. I mean, all of us have had times where things were so hard for us and we were so confused and we just wanted someone to come along and tell us what to do, like in our moments of greatest suffering where we're just like, please just tell me what to do because I don't know.
Or, the classic case of going through some kind of emotional breakdown and you just sit and you eat and you watch TV. It's like,
that apathy.
Just numb out.
Yeah. And just let someone else.
Get programmed, right?
Take care of it. Yeah. But so, as witches, for witches, we as a sort of tenet of our religion, I might say, there is no central authority, right? It's about recognizing that the authority comes from within you and also from within the collective and through the community. So we have personal agency from inside ourselves, and then we have collective agency. But there is no pope. There is no president. It's essentially an anarchistic religion, at least from the kind that I practice. There's also Wicca, which, has a more sort of hierarchical structure coming from its roots in, mid-century England. And then before that, in the Order of the Golden Dawn and back through, the traditions of Western mysticism. But I'm not Wiccan. So, but and one of the reasons why I'm not is because, although, I mean, there's many things that are beautiful about it, and I certainly am not casting aspersions on it, but I do feel like it's, for me, the sort of hierarchy of like high priest and high priestess, and then the sort of lay people, I don't respond to. And for me, in witchcraft, everyone is a priest. Everyone is a priestess. We are all participants. And that's for me what true mysticism is about, that we have a direct connection to the goddess or the god, and to the divine through each of us as individuals. And that we all each also have to hold each other accountable. And it's less comfortable that way. And also, just in terms of like, I also make my living as a witch. So, it's a challenging balance, because, the reason why people come to me is because, they want me to help them solve their problems and think that I will be able to do that. But also, part of what I'm here to do is to remind them that they have the power to solve their own problems, and that I can't, and nobody can just go in and solve your problems for you. And, maybe, my practice of being a professional witch is about helping people see options maybe that they didn't know that they had, or ways to remove obstacles that they couldn't see before because they were so bound up in their sort of stories that they tell themselves, and through sort of getting rid of the things that are in their way so that they can harness the power that they have within themselves to change.
And do you find that most people are responsive to that idea?
I think that most people want to be responsive to that, but it's easier said than done. So I think,
Right.
We try to take responsibility, but also we're very influenced by outside forces, larger forces, capitalism, or the whatever agency in life that we're dealing with. So I feel like I really get really good results with my clients, and I hope that about more than anything that through working with me, they feel more joyous, more energized, a sort of sense of eroticism between themselves and the world. And I don't mean that just in like a sexual way, but I mean that they're in love with the world, and that the world is in love with them.
A love affair with life.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I want them to get out of working with me.
Wow. Where can people find you? oracleoflosangeles.com.
Yeah, they can find me at oracleoflosangeles.com. They can also follow me on Instagram at Oracle of LA, or Facebook at Oracle of LA, I think, or Amanda Yates Garcia. And also I'm coming out with a book next year called Initiated, The Wayward Girl's Guide to Becoming a Witch, which is a memoir and talks about how I found my way through a bunch of scary underworlds and arrived out here.
Oh my God. I got to hear that on the next podcast. I mean, fuck, had I known that, we would have started off with that underworlds. That's exactly what I love hearing about. Next time, we'll cover that.
Next time we'll do it.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure.